Most Canadians hope for Trump defeat after insults, attacks. The insults have very little to do with it. Most Canadians have been hoping for a Trump defeat since he announced his campaign. If he never said a word about Canada, I'd still be wishing for his defeat. Politics aside, we share a lot of media in common with the US, and it'll be the day when I don't have to hear about this motherfucker on a daily basis again. That's nothing new. Canadians were also against Romney and George W. and I assume other Republican candidates before them. Toronto, AP, Donald Trump called Prime Minister Justin Trudeau weak and dishonest and attacked Canada's vital trade. He threatened tariffs on cars and imposed them on steel. The unprecedented tone of attacks on America's closest ally the last 4 years left a bitter taste, and most Canadians will be relieved if Trump is defeated in the election. He's been willing to threaten Canada with dire consequences in a way we have never seen before, said Roland Paris, a former senior foreign policy advisor to Trudeau. Canada is one of the most trade-dependent countries in the world, and Trump's move to rip up the North American Free Trade Agreement and call to impose a 25% tariff on the auto sector posed an existential threat. About 75% of Canada's exports go to the U.S. So preserving a free trade deal was critical, and the two countries, along with Mexico, reached a new agreement last year. But just 6 weeks after it was implemented, Trump announced new tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. Trump has been an unpredictable nightmare, said Nelson Wiseman, a political science professor at the University of Toronto. The government and the overwhelming majority of Canadians are looking and hoping for Trump's defeat. Oh geez. I don't know, maybe we don't like it when you call US a national security threat because you want to buy Russian steel and aluminum more than Canadian. Sorry, but get fucked at. The vast majority of citizens in basically all countries allied to the US except Israel hope for Trump defeat. Trump supporters probably like this. They get off on pissing people off. I don't give a shit about what he says, he is a child and his insults don't hurt. I want him out because America deserves better. I've lived in the US a couple of times, and despite all of the memes about dumb rude Americans, they are mostly good people, like everywhere else. Nobody deserves to live under the control of an infantile megalomaniac like Trump. Most the world hope for Trump defeat. I have to say, as a Canadian, one of my favorite things is to watch Trudeau take no shit from Trump. He may not be the greatest prime minister, but watching that makes me happy. I wish the best for you, our fellow neighbors. Americans complain about him too, but then they make up excuses not to vote. If you really think Joe Biden is as bad as Trump, and you refuse to vote, you deserve what you get. It's not the insults or attacks, it's the fascism. I think you'll find most of the world would like to see him lose. Every normal human on the planet with a brain wants that ass clown gone. You don't have to like the Democratic agenda, but for f***'s sakes, no one with a brain and a conscience should vote for that mess. The RNC should have rejected him as the candidate and chosen a new leader. At least then you could vote Republican with a clear conscience. Seems reasonable. Personally, I think the final nail in the coffin was him being the first president endorsed by the Taliban. Canadian here. I was born and raised in a community of fewer than 1,000 people. I knew almost everyone who lived there. I also kept abreast of everything in my medium-sized province, and I kept aware of Canadian politics and current events. And I was aware of what was going on in the US, so I had multiple different perspectives to observe and digest. Most Americans I've met believe the US is the center of the universe and everyone wants to be an American. Most of them knew very little of what was going on outside their border. If I raised a major issue happening in Europe or Australia or Canada, most had never heard of the issue and had not given the topic much thought. What is my point? Sometimes it's an advantage to have a wider perspective. Canadian here. I would have voted Bernie if I were American. That man has the brain and the heart for the job. So do most Americans. Canadian here. Can absolutely confirm, most of my countrymen, and women, didn't think he had a shot in hell to win the last election, to the point that his campaign rallies were viewed as entertainment, poor guy spinning his wheels trying desperately to convince people to vote for him. Then he won, and it's been 4 years of constantly wondering how far he can push the bar before he's forcefully removed from office, but he just keeps upping the ante of insanity. Person shrugging. I sincerely hope America makes the right choice this time around. They're far too important and influential on the world stage to be such a laughing stock. Canadian here. Not for insults, attacks, but because he's a disgrace to humanity. It is crazy when you come across a Trump supporter in Canada, but then you also find out they have strong religious values, and then it makes sense. I'm pretty sure most Canadians already don't like him. I don't think a few insults are what turned them over. 90% of the world wants Trump out. I'm Canadian and I worry about the impact of this American election on a daily basis. It's a constant ball of stress in my chest and I can't even get the satisfaction of voting against him. I have elementary school kids and they heard about the child separation policy. I had to explain that one over breakfast this morning. It's obvious to the rest of the world that Trump is bad and it impacts more than just Americans. And sadly, with all that we see is happening down south, our country is not immune to stupidity. https://www.cbc.ca/news/politics/Lynn Bayak donated to Trump Republican National Committee 1. American here. For all you wondering how the fuck this guy got into office, Trump was TV personality known for being obnoxious, and he jokingly floated the idea of running for president a few times before he actually did. No one, including many senior Republicans, took him as a serious candidate. McCain, Bush Jr., Powell, Romney, have famously been critical of him. Rand Paul, and Pence, who were originally critical, have since changed their tune. During the election cycle, left-leaning news networks such CNN and MSNBC would give Trump lots of coverage, thinking his inflammatory statements would hurt him and paint Republicans at large as a bunch of buffoons. This backfired hard. All the millions of dollars of free media coverage had precisely the opposite effect. It strengthened support among Republicans, and that liberal pundits went after him only made Republicans love him more. It was all that free media coverage that sealed his victory. The ones who keep wanting Daddy Trump to insult them are on/r/Canada. Not Canadian or US, but I think like 99% of the world we just want to not have to hear about this corrupt orange piece of shit ever again. Not just a defeat, but a humiliating one. He's been picking fights with his country's closest ally, and cozying up to those who are hostile. Fuck him. It really still news that the rest of the world despises Trump. Trump is the epitome of hypocrisy and populism. At the time he was elected, such powers were on a rise. Their rise was very short. All wannabe dictators had tragic COVID responses and plunged their countries' economies to hell. Trump is very unpopular in the whole world, especially in the Western countries. Hope USA elects a worthy president. It's been a shame to see Trump at the office. He is not worth a single rug of it. And Trump made other Republican candidates actually miles better. He will go down as the worst president of the modern Western world in my book. So do many Americans. I'm hoping it's most Americans, but we won't know until next week, or maybe next month.